Okay, great. It is awesome to see so many friendly faces on a beautiful Plymouth day. So my name's Paul, and I've just been asked just to do a few words of introduction. So what we're going to be doing is probably doing a little bit of technical stuff just to make sure it's all working. So what we're going to do is just make sure that we set the tone and the spirit of how we want to be working with each other today. And that involves a bit of housekeeping, because what we want to do is we want to make sure that you feel comfortable and safe, okay? And then what we want to think about is how can we create an open space for dialogue? So the comfortable and safe bit is that there's going to be regular breaks with tea and coffee and the chance to have a chat. But also, you need to know where to run to if there's a fire, okay? So the first thing you need to be aware of is that our fire escape, if we hear the alarm bell go, our fire escape is straight across, okay? If that gets crowded and you're having to run over people, there's also fire escapes in that corner and in that corner, okay? There's toilets, again, across the way and down the end and also in that corner, okay? So there's all the toilet facilities you're going to need on this floor, and our stairway out is immediately opposite us, okay? The next thing that we want to do, though, is to actually just talk about how we want this event to flow in terms of the conversational style we want to really try and establish. Because what we don't want this to feel like is lots and lots of presentations. We want this to be a genuine conversation across all of us. So I just wanted to share this slide that just gives us some principles of how we hope we can be together this morning and this afternoon. And for any of you that haven't seen this picture before, I'm probably going to lose you. So I'm going to be talking and you're just going to be looking at that. So this is an image that actually has got two people within that image. That's the head of two different types of people. There's a young woman and an older woman in that image. And like I say, I've probably lost quite a few of you now already, haven't I? But the reason we use that image is this idea that what we are looking at today, when we're thinking about the resilience and the synergies across this city and across those river catchments of the Tamar and the Plym and across the Sound itself, it's a complex space, it's a rich space, it's a diverse space, and it means that we can see it through many different lenses and many different perspectives. And what we want us to feel today is that we're actually all of those perspectives, all of those points of views, all of those passions, those hearts of why we want to see this city changed and why we appreciate living here. We want you to feel like they are recognized, they are appreciated, they are important to be heard and shared. So it's this idea that what we want to do today is be inclusive, that the knowledge each person brings, every single person here in this room, is valid and important to be listened to in order to be understood. That we want to create a spirit of lifelong learning where we can change our minds today. So I don't want us to feel like we have to be defensive. I quite like the idea that I've come with some real strong convictions, but by lunchtime, because of the conversations I had with some of you, I'm open to being able to change those ideas and go, actually, thank you. I feel different about that now. That we want to recognize that diversity of this city, of this room, and appreciate that and celebrate that. And we want to engage with a critical and creative spirit. So we want to be up for questioning the things that we think we've got done and dusted over the many years of perhaps thinking about those things. And so we use this elephant image that we think, yeah, I know what that is. That's an elephant and it's got 4 legs. But if you look at it long enough, you start to wonder whether it's got 5, 6, and then you start to feel a bit strange. So don't look at that image anymore. Okay? If you can't see the two people and you're desperate to see them, then in the break, come find me and I'll help you see them. But this has been a team effort. So again, the idea is that this is a collective. We want to create a collective space, but it's actually involved a whole range of different people to make this event happen. So we're really appreciative of all the different people. That means that if they hadn't been part of it, this day wouldn't quite be the same. But there are two people I just want to just flag up right from the word go, because those two people are people that means that if they weren't driving this event wouldn't have happened. Okay, and that's Patrick Knight from the council, who's just here, and Bob Brown at the front, who's looking slightly shattered because he's had to run around doing all sorts of things to pull this thing together. Okay, so he talks about there being a team of us here at the bottom, but actually it's been Bob that's really driven this all through from the university's perspective. So we really appreciate that. Thank you both. Okay. So that's the tone and the spirit of how we want to do the day. This is our program. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this kind of phased approach where we're going to be setting the scene in a few minutes. And then we're going to have an international perspective. Then we're going to have a Plymouth perspective, and then we're going to have an academic perspective. So that's going to give us those different lenses to see this city through. And then I think the most exciting bit is in the afternoon. We've then got this workshop space where we'll be able to have these conversations together before coming back, sharing the insights that has brought us to, and thinking about what are those next steps, where do we go from here, and then having a bit of a reception afterwards. Okay? So I'm going to blow the last couple of minutes I've been given by just asking you just to get into that spirit of us all talking and not all just listening. And what I would like you to do is I would like you in a second to turn either front ways or backwards. So you're not allowed to play safe and go to the person that's to your side, because you probably know them already. And what I would like you to do just for a minute is just to introduce yourself. What's your name? What do you love about living or working in Plymouth? Because there's lots to love about it, right? And what are you hoping to get out of giving up your time for being here today? So your name, what do you love about living or working in Plymouth? And what are you hoping to get out of today? You're not allowed to go to your left or right. Can you just go frontwards and backwards? Okay. Can I just pull us back together? Thank you for doing that. I'd love to hear what your loves of Plymouth were. All right. Okay, can I now just hand over to Amanda Razzi, Head of Economy, Enterprise and Employment. Is that right?
No, they dropped just the economy now, just the economy.
I so nearly got it right, from Plymouth City Council. Amanda, thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and welcome everybody. It's quite a hard slot to follow, isn't it? He's like said everything. Yeah, it's quite hard. Although I did like the point about being safe, but climbing over people to get to the fire escape. So that was an interesting analogy. I'm Head of Economy for Plymouth City Council, and it isn't just the economy. It's not something you can look at in isolation. We're just putting together our new economic strategy, and our new economic strategy has got 4 pillars. And the first pillar is around high-value jobs, because Plymouth doesn't need more jobs, it needs better paid jobs. Our second pillar is around sustainability. Our third pillar is around inclusive growth, making sure that everybody benefits from it. And the fourth pillar is around the sense of place, about the place of Plymouth. And they're not 4 separate pillars. They, in my head, because I had to picture things, they are 4 circles in a Venn diagram. And the important part is where they overlap. And this is a statutory document. It's gone through its first stage. It's through consultation. We're now looking at how you move that into reality. So this is a really important piece of work, because this is looking at the ecosystem. It's looking about the context, about how we look at how we take the economy, but in that broadest ecosystem definition for the next 10 years. So I'm really, really touched and very grateful to be invited here to welcome you all. I look forward to what the rest of the day brings, and thank you everybody for helping pulling it together.
Great, thank you, Amanda. Okay, and then could we have Rupert Lorraine from the Arts Institute again, just to give some introductions.
Thanks, Paul. Hi everyone, I just want to say a huge welcome to everyone to the university and to the Faculty of Arts, Humanities and Business. I just wanted to start by saying a huge congratulations to Bob and to Patrick and all of his colleagues for putting together such a fantastic programme. And I also want to say a huge thanks to our team in the Arts Institute and everyone else for being involved in making this event happen. For those of you who aren't aware, our faculty is incredibly broad and interdisciplinary. It spans everything from the Plymouth Business School through to the schools of art, design and architecture, society and culture, and the Institute of Education. And within all of that diversity, perhaps despite all of that diversity, there's an incredibly strong and unifying theme all around people and place. And I think really that's what today is all about, and we're going to hear from a lot of varied speakers who are going to make that abundantly clear. I always feel incredibly privileged to be working with so many committed and inspirational people who work across all of those disciplines and who really care about Plymouth as a place, about the people who live here, who work here, who study here. And who really want to make a significant positive impact on our society, on our environment, and on our economy. And it always strikes me, sort of coming into work, that every day there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people, really talented, skilled people, all working towards that common goal across our university. Whether that's through the incredible sort of research and knowledge exchange projects that go on, whether it's through engaged learning, where our colleagues are aligning the curriculum and the learning outcomes of our students with the needs and interests of our communities, or whether it's through the lens of creativity and culture, so thinking about the way in which we're transforming our public programme as a platform for sort of civic discourse and a way of connecting people, ideas and opportunities. And so I think harnessing sort of all of that opportunity, that constellation of things that go on and within the university, and connecting it with our communities, with our partners and with our stakeholders is really the most valuable thing that we do here. Everyone I know that works at the university understands that to do this work successfully requires genuine and authentic co-creation and collaboration and partnership. And at the end of the day, this kind of work, it's all about people and relationships. By definition, knowledge exchange, which is the kind of umbrella term for a lot of the work that we do, is all about working together in a two-way exchange of knowledge for mutual benefit. We're very values-based here at the university. I think openness, inclusivity and collaboration are defining characteristics of the way that we work. And what we're really trying to do here through the work of the Arts Institute and all of our colleagues is to create a welcoming space at the university for everybody to engage with our community. Now, I do see a large part of our role within the Arts Institute as being able to support and amplify as much of this great work as possible, thinking about how we can deliver it at ever greater scale, and how we can help to connect, shape and guide all the myriad different forms of knowledge exchange that are going on so that they become greater than their sum of their parts, so that we deliver as much impact and value as possible. A lot of that work involves overcoming all the barriers and constraints that we face. Everybody knows we work on different timescales to industry. We have a huge challenge with the scale of a massive organisation working with smaller partners and community groups. The campus and perceptions of the university as a physical place can be a real barrier to engaging with the public. We need to navigate bureaucracy, if you can believe that. And we deal with all kinds of funding constraints. The list is endless, but it is possible to overcome those challenges. And I think we're really lucky to work with some fantastic people, some very entrepreneurially minded people who can work within those constraints and overcome them. So I think we should be very proud of that aspect of what we do, and we're very lucky to have those people. That's really all I wanted to say. It just leaves me to invite you to enjoy the day. I'm really looking forward to doing a lot of listening and learning throughout the day. I'm sure we're all going to be inspired and that we're also going to have a lot of fun. Please do talk to us throughout the day and share your ideas about how we can build on this momentum. And please do let us know, who's not in the room today, who needs to be part of this conversation and how can we get them involved. I hope you all have a really great day. I'd just like to ask us to please give everyone who's made this event happen a very big round of applause. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to try and anchor this first part of our day together. And what we're going to be doing is is just thinking about how can we set the scene for how we can co-join the city, the land and the sea. And so we've got 3 speakers, and Bob, perhaps you'll be able to introduce those speakers better than I. And they're going to start with Bob Brown. And Bob is incredibly passionate and enthusiastic about this whole theme, and I've had the privilege of working with him for a number of years around this. So I've got this polite notice, because there's no way he's going to do it in 10 minutes. There's no way. And so far, we're to time. So I've got my 1-minute warning, and then I've got my stop sign that is a little bit more blunt, okay? So we're going to try and keep the speakers to time, because actually what we think is the richer space is the Q&A, is the conversation, is the dialogue afterwards. So you've got 10 minutes, my friends.
Thank you very much, Paul. I also want to specifically note Sam Brazier doing all things digital up here, lifesaver in my teaching, and Alistair Watts, who's manning the camera and has helped set everything up. They've been indispensable in terms of their help. So, 10 minutes. I want to set the scene, and a lot of the things I'm going to talk about have already been mentioned already. Great notions of co-joining, relationships, I think are just key to today. And I know that Bruce and Waleed, and also Kathy speaking with Bruce, are going to pick up on some of those things. So I'm going to go very quickly, also with the 10 minutes in mind. Next slide, please. So why am I here? I'm here because of these guys. I'm thinking 30 years ahead, when they're not quite as old as I am now, but they're in the middle of their life. I'm concerned about their future. I'm also concerned about a place like Plymouth. I've been fortunate enough to have traveled to 62 different countries in my life. Plymouth, with the possible exception of San Francisco, is the most amazing setting for a city I have ever seen. I love this place for what it offers, and I love these guys, obviously. That's why I'm here. But I'm also concerned about what is life going to be like for them and for Plymouth in 30 years' time. Next, please. Well, what is Plymouth going to be like? It has an uncertain future. A number of headlines picked up. This wasn't hard to find. Go on Google or anything, you just start seeing headlines that make you stay up at night, worrying about things. This lovely little map showing Plymouth in 30 years' time. This is projected flooding based on either a 1.5 degree temperature rise, which is where we're headed at the very least. So all these areas that are in the kind of blue here, which include Sutton Harbor, Mill Bay, Stonehouse Creek, South Yard going up into the Naval Yard, will be underwater or subjected to significant nuisance flooding. If it gets even warmer, up to 3 degrees warmer, all the areas of red will be added into that. So we're looking at a future where coastline of Plymouth will change tremendously. But it's not just about sea level rise, changing temperatures. We maybe have a climate more like Barcelona. That sounds great until you think about all the clay and the ground and how it's used to being wet and suddenly it's dry. You're going to have a fun day with foundation problems. Economic impact of that change in terms of the agriculture, social impact, issues of health, political impact. We did some work with a local school. This is what the children are telling us. That's what they're concerned about. So this is an uncertain future. Next, please. However, I'm not optimistic. I'm not burying my head in the sand. I've been fortunate enough to work in a number of places in a number of different roles in the world. I've found things that do work. So drawing upon practice, teaching, research, there is a way forward. It's not all doom and gloom, but we need to be aware of those challenges. Next, please. This has been part of an ongoing dialogue over a number of years, people like Patrick, others in the room, with students, and worldwide, thinking about how do we address these issues. Next, please. So what have we been doing? We've been mapping out different scenarios, speculating on what the future might be. That's ranged from some work together with Professor Sheena Santha, who you hear from later today, for the Wolfson Economic Prize a couple of years ago. And we're looking at how do we improve healthcare in the city in 30 years' time, and what is it going to be like? And we're looking at the idea of distributing resources, reinforcing neighborhoods, bringing assets together, not just health, but combining with education, social activities. So this was a redrawing of the City of Plymouth map, thinking about how we have an expanded and co-joined network. This is some work done by students in MARC program this year. We're looking at the River Plym, what might happen in 30 years' time. We took those headlines that we showed before, as well as the input from the school children. They fed it into the AI engine. And this is their image of the River Plym in 2050. That's not the students playing a bit of science fiction, which we love, but them just feeding it into that engine. The River Plym has vastly changed. Saltram House doesn't quite exist the way it is. The rail yard is gone, all kind of decimated, but at the same time, there's this kind of reclaiming back. There's a sense of optimism that new opportunities will arise from that. So we're trying to think about that, and this is sort of work we've been doing with students for a number of years. We've been very successful in terms of the support we've received or recognition from outside bodies. So this is part of an ongoing discussion that I think Paul's already alluded to. Next, please. So where do we go from here? Some suggestions, things learned from those experiences. One, notably about change. Things Change. Very good book. Highly recommended it. Very accessible. Amitav Ghosh, The Great Derangement. And a capacity to think things aren't going to change. And we need to face up to the reality that things aren't going to be kind of always the way that we accept now. So really encourage you to read it. Also recognizing we need to respond in response to, or in the face of those sort of challenges and that change. And then how do we start to plan for change? Another good read. In contrast to a lot of discussion, certainly in academia, about the theory of challenge or theory of change, which I recognize as a value, I want to introduce the idea of panarchy. How do we operate in the context of unpredictable change? How do we come up with agendas that work, that deal with multiplicity, limitations, contradictions, and bottom up as well as top down? And also the need to take a longer view. Somebody I was privileged to work with a number of years ago, John Turner, thinking about we're putting things in place now that will impact our children. That's the kind of mindset that we need. How do we get those programs in place that benefit people 20 or 30 years down the road? Next, please. So, other suggestions, joined up thinking, building, and this is based on work did for DFID, Department for International Development, a number of years ago. One, building on existing successes, piggyback, link agendas to enable synergies, bring different things together. A new doctor's program aligned, or not new doctor surgery aligned with a creche, and they pool their money together and are able to do together what they couldn't do on their own. Hybridity, so adaptive or multiple use of things. We need to change the way that we think about putting in place agendas, built environment. Also understanding the city not as bounded by any sort of political line, but part of a wider network that's already been mentioned, courtesy of Amanda, appreciate that. And also how to find connections across various scales. So what we're doing in the city center, but how does that relate to something out on the River Plym? And then recognize the need for agility over monolithic. My reference here is Drake's privateers versus the Spanish Armada. We know who won. This is the way the British Army's going too. We need to be able to respond quickly. We need agility, not to think about big ocean liners that take a lot of time to move. We need Drake's privateers. Next, please. And I'm running out of time. And finally, transformative evolutionary resilience. The idea that beyond just sustainability, which I recognize is a good thing, is trying to keep things at an equilibrium, or the idea of bouncing back. How do we actually transform? How do we change? Which may include working with the problem and the solution. Next, please. I've got about 1 minute left. Going to quickly talk about two of my favorite schemes. Ndlovu Medical Center in Limpopo, South Africa, famous because they came in second place with their youth choir in America's Got Talent. But more known for the programs they've done in terms of health, but also they've got a bakery, they run a post office, they brought a number of things together to support the community. What I find fascinating is when the doctor who took out a second mortgage to start this up and bought some bricks and got some workmen locally to start building, they would take their earnings at the end of the week and go down to the pub. And in a very impoverished community, they were suddenly everybody's friend. And then the money would disappear, and then the wives came along to the doctor saying, what's going on? Our husbands are working, but they don't have any money. Problem is, these guys like to party. His solution was, every Friday night, the doctor held a braai, the South African barbecue, and he had a party. So the men weren't going along to the pub, spending all their money. They were having a party there, and the wives were very happy. And as we all know, if the wives are happy, things are great. So he specifically embraced the idea, the problem, these guys like to party. That's my solution. Next one. And then Coin Street Community Builders in London, fantastic scheme. They fought for a number of years to win the right to the land so they could stay and not be kicked out by some developers who wanted to change the landscape, support from Southwark and Lambeth Council. The very first thing that they did was they reached out to their enemy. They reached out to the people they'd been fighting and said, what can we do for you? We're going to put in place Gabriel's Wharf, all these makeshift huts and so forth. Local community will be selling food. You can come here from ITV Television, IBM. You can have lunch here. It's still there 40 years later. Incredible success. But what I find fascinating is their very first response was, we're going to reach out to our enemy and find a way to work with them. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We've got 10 minutes, so I'll rattle through this very quickly. Thanks, Bob. Actually, I'm going to pick up one of the things that Bob said to sort of frame what Kathy and I are going to be saying, which is there is a way forward for that more difficult world that Bob started to paint. In that context, I'm going to suggest some areas of comfort. There is a way forward. There can be optimism in this, but some areas of challenge. There is a way forward means actually you've got to get down and do the work to build that way forward. So that's the frame for our debate. Three things by way of introduction about what we're going to be saying. First, this is absolutely the right thing to do. When we come onto our slides, you'll see a lot of people are doing this already. A lot of countries, a lot of localities in the UK are doing this already. Secondly, that means that, if I'm channel my inner Michael Jackson, you are not alone. There's plenty of people doing this, plenty of people to learn from, plenty of good practice, plenty of experience out there if you want to. So that's an element of comfort, but if you want to put the muscle into doing something in this space. Third, this isn't high policy. I mean, there is some high policy stuff. This isn't stuff that's littered with jargon. A lot of this is just plain, straight, common sense. And I hope that'll come through what we say. First, I should introduce ourselves very quickly. I won't run through it all. Kathy and I have done resilience in the UK government. We're now doing resilience in a whole bunch of countries around the world who, frankly, are taking the resilience agenda a bit more seriously than the present UK government. I should also say I'm an ex-governor or recently retired governor of Plymouth University, just to declare that interest. I should also say we're lapsed civil engineers as well, both Kathy and I. Unfortunately, not at Plymouth, at Sheffield and Liverpool, respectively. So moving on to what we want to say, next slide. The linkage between sustainability and resilience. We are moving into a more difficult world, not just climate change, there's a whole heap of other risks. Recognized quite a long time ago, actually, almost 30 years ago now, that especially in 2015, when three major international agreements were negotiated and agreed simultaneously in the same year. And they bring through the link between resilience and sustainability. Obviously, the Sustainable Development Goals, which everybody knows about, but with two important ones, you see Richard in the room. SDG 11, making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable. Notice those two words, resilient and sustainable, operating together. Second, not Richard, SDG 14, sustainable use of marine and maritime. Also agreed that year, the Paris Agreement, climate change. Obviously, one of the biggest impediments to sustainability is changes in climate. Obvious point. Third, which many people don't actually have on their radar screens, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, on the same grounds. Climate change will hold back economic and social development, so will major disasters. You only have to think of COVID-19 and what that has done around the world, and especially in some of the less developed countries. Thank you. here is where you're not alone. Here is where this is a good thing to do. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction encourages countries to have both national and local resilience strategies. As at the end of 2022, you'll see there are 126 countries. More than half the nations on this planet had got national resilience strategies. Unfortunately, the UK is not one of them. At the end of 2022, there were 101 countries, about half the nations on this planet, who said we have got local resilience strategies throughout our nation. And that's the kind of thing that Kathy and I are helping on now. They had 4 priorities. This is not rocket science. They had 4 priorities inside that framework, which they suggested all nations should pursue. 1, understand the risks you face. 2, get governance mechanisms to manage those risks. 3, invest in risk reduction. Try to avoid those risks if you can. 4, prepare for when those risks do happen. As I say, it's not rocket science. That is straight common sense. And they suggested that should be the framework for disaster risk reduction strategies. That's the international setting. Let me turn to Kathy as we go down the chain.
So Bruce has already said that there are many places that have been doing this in the world. This started predominantly focusing on cities. Actually, when you look at it, you find those cities aren't just really a small urban area. Actually, they have also covered quite a lot of wider hinterland, which obviously is in the space you're in. So resilient cities, take that as more resilient places more generally. Started in 2013, the Rockefeller Foundation put some money in, created a network of 100 resilient cities. There are a number which are in the UK, London, Greater Manchester, Bristol, for example. And they were very much focusing on how can we help those cities build resilience across the whole wide dimension that we've just been hearing about. So not just physical, social, economic challenges to build resilience. That morphed over time into 2020 into a Resilient Cities Network, brought in a wider group of cities. And again, same sort of agenda about reducing vulnerability. Alongside that, Rockefeller Foundation funded Arup to do some research to try and pull out the good practice from what all those cities were learning as they tried to build their resilience. And it was really to provide, as it says there, a lens, a framework to help cities think about what resilience might look like. It was also to give them a self-assessment tool. So we could say, okay, how are we doing against that? Where are our gaps? Where are our weaknesses? Let's put together a plan to try and address it. Just go on to the next slide. What they came up with, and as I say, this was put forward as dimensions for resilient cities, but take it as resilient places, was 4 key dimensions. And as both Amanda and Bob have said, you cannot look at these in isolation. You have to get all of this working together in order to be resilient. So just to run through some of them, health and well-being. So things like safing human life and welfare, addressing human vulnerabilities. That could be anything from safe drinking water to safe and affordable housing, healthcare services, for example. Economy and society. How do you make sure you have a sustainable economy, an attractive business environment? How do you also, Amanda touched on this, how do you also build that sense of identity, that collective identity and sense of place? Third, infrastructure and environment. How do you make sure you've got reliable transport, essential services, communications? How do you make sure you build on your environment and heritage? Very important here. And leadership and strategy. Have you got that effective governance that Bruce talked about? Have you got integrated development planning that's all working together to try and build that resilience in?
Thank you. So, in conclusion, 2 or 3 points. One is the sell. The third, the last 3 are the challenges. Here's the sell. Being resilient in the next 20 years, in that more difficult world, I'm going back to Bob's children and grandchildren, I think, gives places a competitive edge. And in the countries that we work in, that is absolutely on the minds of senior leaders. People see resilient places as good places to live and work. Investors see them as investable. So, 3 takeaways. Here's the challenge. If you want to get into this space, here are the three key levers which we think are absolutely essential before you start. First, resilient places need to be clear on their purpose and their place. You need to be clear about what resilience means, and you need to be clear about place. So both of those words, resilient place, need to be clear to everybody. We put on that slide definitions which you'll see from Greater Manchester, London and Bristol, who are already working on resilient places. This isn't just international. We'll leave these slides behind afterwards. They're on the shared space, so I won't run through them. But what you'll see inside there is coming through is shocks. Yes, absolutely. Stresses, the day-to-day stresses in society. You'll also see words like everyone can grow up and work well together, local and global investors, resilient citizens. You're starting to get some key phrases which, if you unpack them, start to shape the kind of things you might want to think about doing. Second, again, I'm picking up on Bob's children or grandchildren, really. Resilient places build resilience in. They don't just wait for something to happen. They look long-term, 20, 30, even longer in the built environment. They're proactive. They take a long-term view of the risk. Delighted to see Bob's slides. Focus on where the potential benefits are going to be greatest. To go with the grain, ideally, existing planning, transportation, land use policies. But that co-joining thing at the end, they try to bring in businesses, communities, the voluntary and charitable sector and so on, the so-called whole of society approach. Third, I'm back to that good governance, but especially that leadership point. Building resilience in goes much wider than planning for emergencies. It needs that, as I say, that work on land use, transportation, housing, and so on. That involves a much wider range of stakeholders. It involves all departments in any council, in my view. That needs, therefore, clear leadership from the top, leader of the cabinet and senior officers, and it needs them to be curious. It needs them to ask the difficult questions. How resilient are we? Where are the gaps? In 20 years, how are we going to look? They need to ask the difficult questions, get the difficult answers, and then do something about it, which is my final challenge. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bruce. And Kathy, I'm sorry I didn't introduce you, but I think you did a very good job of introducing yourselves. Finally, in this mini session, we have Walid Al-Sakaf from Rebalance Earth. He's going to be joining us online.
Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent.
So I'm gonna turn over to you, Walid. Thank you for joining us. We're very pleased that you could be here and very happy that Patrick and I have been able to work with Walid for about the past year discussing things in relation to Plymouth, but also generally. And Walid's going to be sharing with us some of his experience globally. Thank you.
Thank you. And apologies, I can't join you all today. It's Eid for me here, so happy Eid to all of you. Lots of great points that came out through the previous speakers, and driving force, like for Bob, is my kids. And here I'm going to focus more on the investment side, because of course, to do these kind of transformational changes, we need a lot of money to make it happen. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So I'll tell you a little bit about ourselves. So my co-founder and I, Rob Gardner, we set up Rebalance Earth, and Rebalance Earth is launching what's called the Rebalance Earth Nature Recovery Fund. It's a £250 million fund that is aimed to kick off by the end of this year, that will grow to 5 to 10 billion pounds by 2035. There is a 50 to 100 billion pound gap in the UK to address nature. We're going to address it in a slightly different way than most other nature restoration fund. We're not focusing on carbon credits and biodiversity credits. Whilst these are interesting tools, we don't believe they're the ones who will have the maximum impact. So we're here to really tackle 5 challenges, which are, I would argue, are very relevant to Plymouth, which is why we've been talking to the different stakeholders in Plymouth. Number 1 is reducing flooding. 2 is reducing drought. 3 is improving water quality. Fourth, increasing biodiversity, ecosystem, and health. And fifth is carbon sequestration. So you see where carbon is at the bottom. Why? Is because the first three actually are immediate problems that we're seeing today. And what is key is that to those immediate problems, there are budgets. There are companies who are addressing these problems either through insurance premiums or through gray infrastructure. And we're saying that there's actually the best infrastructure out there that's been tested for centuries. It's called nature. And nature should be seen as infrastructure. And if you start doing that, you can start redirecting the flow of private capital to protect and restore nature. So if you go to the next slide, please. So how do we fundamentally work? And I'll go into more details about that later on. But effectively, our fund comes in from the pension industry, because what's the use of having a healthy pension in your old age if the air you breathe is unbreathable, the water you drink is undrinkable? We cannot live in a world that's worth living in. And that's what we're here to address with our investors in the pension industries. With the funds that they invest, we take a very landscape approach. You know, a lot of other speakers are saying everything has to be connected. Everything is interconnected in nature, but so are we. No matter what we think, we are part of nature. So you need this kind of landscape approach to restoration. It cannot be piecemeals here and there. It has to be at a landscape level. So we do these kind of projects, and the way we can provide a return to our investors is first and foremost is through this concept called nature as a service, which I'll talk about in a little detail. And then to some degree, there will be some BNG units and carbon credits. Everything that we do has to be related to the UN SDGs, sustainable cities and communities, climate action, life below water, and life on land. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we all know we're in trouble. The data that's coming out on a regular basis is actually worse than what we had estimated. And that is of concern. Now, the previous speaker were talking about resilience, and resilience is extremely relevant. Now, we actually are focusing on the UK's 13 critical national infrastructures, the 13 CNIs. Why? Because if you don't have those 13 CNIs operating correctly, you cannot govern the UK. So we've picked three of those CNIs, being food, water, and transport. And these are the areas where we're going to start doing a lot of investment within those areas to ensure a steady supply of food, clean water, and efficient transport. Why businesses invest in this was because close to 50% of them are already being impacted by climate change. And that is due to increase in the upcoming future. It's not all doom and gloom, though, because McKinsey, for example, estimates a global market opportunity of $1 trillion for British businesses by 2030. So there is an opportunity for businesses to reinvent themselves and address this challenge. So as I said, we take this landscape approach from the source to sea, because you have to operate and you have to think in a similar manner to nature. So it has to be interconnected, and critically, you've got to take this long-term view, which is why we partner with the pension industry, because compared to other more, let's say, private capital providers, whether it's venture capitalists and others, they think more in quarters or in 1 year. When you work with nature, you have to think in decades. That's the right approach to doing it. So what does landscape restoration mean? Well, it means restoring the moorlands, the peatlands, the kelp forests, the Thames Valley A and B, the community forests, the grassland, even the beavers. It's about looking at sustainable urban drainage systems, and it's also looking at the shorelines. So when you look at a restoration, you look at this really landscape level, and you say, okay, a lot of the projects have been focusing on 1 million here, 500,000 here. What could you do if you had access to 100 million, 150 million? What kind of change could you do? Because that's the way you got to think, and you can bring all the companies who have an asset risk and a supply chain risk to pitch into this kind of project. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I think it's important to recognize, when I'm coming back to the CNIs, the 13 CNIs, food is one of them, and it's an important one, and it's very relevant to the Southwest because of its production of cattle and also in dairy products. The UK at the moment produces 54% of its own food, including the majority of grains, meat, dairy, and eggs, which is good. But then if you go to the next slide, you will see that in 2022, you know, there was a massive amount of drought in the UK, not just in the UK, but also across the EU. That led to a 40% drop in yield, in wheat yield, 25 to 30% in carrot yields, 40% in onions, and also potato yields. Scary is that by 2050, up to 1,090% increase on heat stress is going to happen to cattle, which of course is all in a third of it coming from the Southwest. How do you mitigate this risk? How do you build business resilience, or I would say societal resilience to these issues? So we've been talking a lot to the likes of Patrick and his colleagues in Plymouth in terms of, well, how can you make Plymouth a case study? And what we really like about Plymouth is that it's the kind of Goldilocks. You know, it has, you know, the shoreline, it has the Plym, the Tamar River, the Yelm. And it's got a really landscape approach. And we figured that if we can crack it in Plymouth, we can crack it all across the UK. And there are a number of areas where you can have an impact, which is one is, as I said, is nature as a service, which I'll be talking about, BNG units and carbon credits through a number of interventions, such as river rewiggling, wetland creation, shoreline restoration, SUDs, and biodiversity enhancements. So these projects, interventions, will help to reduce flood risk, drought, sewage or water quality, heat stress, carbon credits, and BNG units. And these, as you can see on the table, create real value for water utility companies. For those of you who may not know, with under Ofwat, the water regulator, PR24 mandates water utility companies to prove that they've considered using nature-based solutions. Dairy products, whether it is the likes of Premier Foods, Arla, Saputo, are good ones to target. Rail network, you know, flood impacts that network significantly, as does a highway agency. So I've talked to you a lot about the nature as a service. It is similar in a way to software as a service. So what it is here is that it's a series of, if you want, bilateral contracts where companies understand they have, for example, a flood risk. Now, the way they deal with that flood risk is through insurance premiums or a gray infrastructure like flood defenses made of concrete and steel. Now, for them to really reduce that risk, you should re-wiggle the river. As you know, our rivers have been straightened in the UK. They need to be re-wiggled. They need to come back to their natural state. You need to create wetlands. And the beauty of that is that you can slow down the river flow. You can mitigate flooding. You can mitigate drought risk. But you can create, through those wetlands, attraction of insects, of birds, pollination. You can improve the earth soil quality. That's the beauty about nature. Once you invest in it, it compounds. It keeps giving you more and more. But to re-wiggle a river, we're talking about tens, if not 100 million pounds. Not a single company is going to do that. And that's where we come in. We bring in 100 million, for example. We then create this kind of jigsaw puzzle of all the companies who are impacted by flooding. And we say, how about for the next 20 to 30 years, you will pay us a certain amount, whether it's 100,000 pounds a year to £1 million a year, for us to reduce that flooding risk, to reduce that drought risk, where you're leveraging nature's infrastructure to provide those solutions, services for you. And that's something which is really innovative that we're trying out now with a number of companies around the UK. We, of course, then have the standard kind of products such as BNG units and carbon credits. But the real focus here is, how do you leverage nature as infrastructure by investing into it so that it can provide the services that we so desperately need? Finally, everything you do, you have to have, you know, effective monitoring, reporting, and verification. And we leverage a lot of technology that we've been building, whether it's in the AI space, that, you know, it was interesting to see those diagrams that Bob shared, or whether it is even up to a way to using blockchain technology to providing trust, transparency, and traceability. So we divide into three sections how we use technology. One is to create awareness. So on the left-hand side, we did a hackathon with Microsoft, where we demonstrated that if rainfall was to increase by X amount, this how flooding grows. And if you were to restore the river, the Plym River upstream, you can reduce that kind of impact, both in terms of the scale of the flooding, but number of buildings that are flooded, number of tracks, rail tracks, the number of roads, and the costs that relate to that. Then, as I said, that's a design, develop, and deliver phase, which is identifying the areas where you can do this nature restoration. And finally, once you do it, you've got to do the monitoring. And it's not just monitoring using drones, satellites, but also citizen science. It's using the UN SDGs. So what do I mean by that? I just want to finish on this point. When you want to tackle nature, you've got to get the local community on board. You cannot do it with local community participation because this is a product that requires decades. So it's not just a bottom-up approach, it's also, top-down approach. The two have to join together. And if you think about some of the communities in Plymouth, like Devonport, which are affected, by the downsizing of the MOD, it's how can you give them a path of employment in a green economy? So at the beginning, this can start by citizen science. How can I use my mobile phone to start taking pictures to see, well, how has the river quality improved? I can take pictures, I can share that, and I can be rewarded with some, let's say, some Tesco vouchers initially. But in the future, this could be actually some form of employment. It's how can you get every citizen involved in the reporting and the verification of the platform? And finally, again, on that point about citizen engagement is we're using AI. And for those of you who are familiar with ChatGPT, one of its great innovations was that it opened it up so that everyone could play with it. And why this is so important is because it enabled the AI to learn from the questions people were asking, the simulations they were doing, and the data they were uploading. We want every citizen in Plymouth to use our digital platform to try and see, well, what does good look like? If money was not a problem, how would you restore Plymouth from a nature perspective? What does good look like? And this is very important because you're getting buy-in and you're also getting information to the decision makers of how we need to be able to do this restoration. And getting this kind of buy-in on the long run is what enables us to deliver scalable, effective, nature-based solutions for the entire Plymouth. And Plymouth, as I said, is a golden lock for the entire UK. So if you crack Plymouth, you crack the UK. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Wally. Okay, so that's been about setting the scene, and it's sobering, isn't it? So we've been hearing about the risks, those multiple manifold points of crisis, and one of the things that occurred to me was that my house was in one of the red zones that was on Bob's slide. Slide flip. But then we've also been talking about the vision of the possible, and then we've been thinking about how do we change make? How do we change make? And how do we do that together, collaboratively? So what we want to do is we've got a few minutes for us to just have a bit of a conversation, and I want to break the idea that that's just a Q&A. So I'll get another written warning, but that's fine. So could you just pair up, just have someone around you and just have a conversation around what has that made you think? What has struck you from what you've been hearing or the thoughts that's given you or how it's resonated with what you've already come with from your years and years of experience? Could you just have a conversation in twos or threes just to get all of our voices going around? So what's my reaction to what I've heard so far? Is that okay? And then we'll come back and we will have a chance to do a few questions and a few comments. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. So we have Waleed still with us. We've got Bruce and Kathy, and we've also got Bob. So there's a chance just for a few minutes. We've got around 5 minutes for a couple of questions or a couple of comments. It doesn't have to be a question. If there's something passionate that you'd just like to share with everybody, that's absolutely fine too. But are there any questions or comments to get us going? Just to explain, you won't need the microphone because we've got mics that will pick it up for the recording. But if you could just speak loud enough so we could all hear, that would be great. So we don't have to do that job of passing around a mic. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I mean, it's a really, really good point. And one of the things that the challenges that actually all those cities that we talked about before who've looked at this is that balance between, do they just focus on the sort of acute shocks, you know, the floodings and the severe weather, or do they actually get into the chronic issues? And the danger you get is that you try and put everything onto this agenda and you try and make this agenda solve the whole world's problems, and it's never going to do that. So you'll find that a lot of people focus more on the shocks than the stresses, the chronic stresses. But I think, you know, I think we all say, you know, you're not going to achieve success unless you can get those people engaged. So it's finding the agendas that do mean something to them. And whether it's, I don't know, I'm going to be really flippant here, you know, helping people grow their own food or something so that they then can get cheaper food or better quality food, maybe that's part of the solution. So it's being really innovative about the solutions, I guess. But there's no, I don't think there's a fabulous answer, I'm afraid. Others may have one.
I'm happy to take that on, and in the spirit of the day, I'm happy to stick my neck out. I had a very nice conversation with Patrick Knight and Hannah Harris up here at the front and talking about some of the challenges we faced, and I think your question really picks up on that. And I think ultimately one's going to have to identify some priorities, and this is where I would go back to the idea of co-joining things. In particular, my experience from places in Africa build on successes. So what are the successes in Plymouth and how do we build from them? Don't think we can start from scratch, because that's going to take a long time to happen. So, you know, whether it's within this room, the city council, collective partners, you know, however it happens, can you identify the things that become the real drivers that can pull other things with them? I have my own thoughts on that, but I think it's also for the people in the room to also think about what are the successes that could become those drivers.
Yeah, what I would say is actually this is one agenda, like many, 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 many other agendas as Kathy said, they're pulling everything into C. This is also an agenda which is 1,000 little actions. It can be 1,000 little actions. It's not what big league out to pull, but you've heard actually what Roddy was saying. So it may be a whole bunch of people don't want to do anything, just as fine, as long as there are some people who want to do it. We tend to find is that actually the attitude of people in this space varies depending on the kind of environment they're in. Can be significant bits of this current people have the attitude, different expectations, different approaches. The rural areas we also work. So it is also finding that horses for courses as well. What is the contribution to Cafe was to go with the grain of their expectations in their day-to-day lives.
Okay, then we're gonna move on now. But one of the things we've just realised, because we've got some more speakers that are going to be zooming in, is that we are going to need to use the microphone, so that the guys that are zooming in can hear those really important questions. Is that all right? Sorry, Stacey. Okay. But thanks for taking part, and there's going to be more chance for questions and comments as we go through, but I'm just going to be the timekeeper, I think, it's my role.
Okay. We're doing okay time-wise. Paul's done well. So thank you to Cathay and Bruce, and also thank you to Waleed for joining us, and happy Eid.